Welcome to From the Backseat. I'm your host, Ethan, and I'm joined by Clark. And on today's episode, we are finishing out our mock draft with picks 19 through 32. So if you missed our first part, make sure to either go back an episode, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to go watch our last episode. Now here is From the Backseat.
I'm Joe. Nice to meet you, brother. I love watching you grow up.
He's pulling down his pants. Put up your pants, my man.
Touchdown!
Is this the dagger?
And Fernando Tatis Jr., a grand slam.
Iguodala. It's funny to hear a female talk about routes. Like,
Pull up your pants. Take off the bra and be a man.
Welcome to From the Backseat, hosted by Clark and Ethan.
it's funny.
Hello. Welcome officially to From the Backseat. I'm Ethan, and I am joined today by my co-host.
What up, guys? This is Clark, someone who took Brock Bowers at 10th overall and apparently was told that is not a win now pick. I was unaware, taking a I don't know, whatever. Think what you want, but Brock Bowers is definitely a win now player. That's a luxury pick any team would definitely have. But I'm excited for the next half of our draft. I'm really looking forward to it. We have so much to unpack.
Yeah, so as we do our little bit of introductions, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're just listening audio version, I will read through the picks here in a second. But if you're on YouTube, if you want to look through what we already picked, I think we do need to address. We were left a huge comment, and honestly,
just one of the craziest comments. Like, I get
they were
I
they were
appreciate
both
you.
going after Clark to a certain extent.
Which I felt like was ridiculous. I mean, I get it. Like, sure, go after me. It's fun. But some of the comment, like, okay, maybe the Zach Wilson take needs a little bit of revision.
Yeah.
Maybe. Sure.
I mean,
that's
I
fine.
understood his point of like, don't put JJ McCarthy, but then like his reasoning of why JJ McCarthy is good was just like, okay, he throws the ball hard. Great. Same did Zach Will. Like, I don't get what you're making up.
Again, there's McCarthy has good stuff. The off script is there. Again, the arm talent is certainly applicable. He's a good athlete. I guess maybe if I were to update my comp, I really think his ceiling, what he would be more of a Alex Smith, maybe. But that's as far as I'm going to go. I still am not a believer in JJ McCarthy. Again, I think if he went to Minnesota, as we pointed out, that's a very advantageous situation for him. That's a good place for him to fall. We've talked about it. He has O'Connell. He has a great wide receiving core. There's building blocks there to have, help him be successful moving forward. But I'm still not going to sit here and say, oh, congratulations, JJ McCarthy. I think you're a franchise quarterback, because I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I totally agree, but we'll see. I was defending JJ a little bit more than you were. I wouldn't say I'm like fully in, but like I understand the tools are there, and and that's why I was saying, like, I just think if he goes to the Vikings, I think he has the best chance to be good. Now, if he ended up in like New England, which is being talked about right now, then just kiss that career gone. Like,
we'll get it. Again, for a guy like, I mean, situation is always such a big part of quarterback development.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, that's a huge aspect of being successful, is finding a spot that is going to help you build, and maybe finding somewhere that's competent, that's going to really dive into your success. New England would be really tough because, yes, Brady was there, but the development of Mac Jones was horrible. And I don't think Mac Jones was ever, I'd have to go back and look at my notes. I wasn't very high on him. But
his rookie year, he was pretty good. He was the best rookie.
No, his rookie year, he was good.
on.
And I think that was the point I was going to get to, is that the progression got worse as the years went on.
Yeah.
That's not good.
For sure.
But anyway.
Yeah, and they just don't have very much talent.
Yeah. And McCarthy, if he goes to Minnesota, that's the spot. That's the spot he really should hope to go to.
Before we move into it, I want to talk through one draft day thing we didn't talk about that's kind of getting on people's radar, and it has to do with the top of the draft. So I went through and talked about, like, if the Cardinals don't move, then the Chargers are probably moving. Now, something that's been floated around recently in mock drafts, I'm curious what you think, is the idea that it would be a 3-team trade, and that the Vikings would go up to 4 and the Cardinals would drop to 5, and then the Chargers would go to 11 and 23. And this idea that every team is still kind of getting what they want. Arizona would move down a spot and still get Marvin Harrison. Chargers would get 2 first-round picks. And then the Vikings would obviously get their pick at 4.
Yeah, so if you would ask me this like 3 days ago, I probably would have said that's a little bit too much of Twitter GM ship. But then I saw the video of the Arizona Cardinals GM from about 2 days ago.
Yeah.
He looks like he's on LSD, calling every other GM trying to make a move.
Yeah.
And I'm sure war rooms around the NFL, maybe not that hectic, but on the first round draft day, obviously there was a lot of moving parts. So involving Arizona with their GM like that, yeah, I'll give it a little bit of credence. I think the possibility could maybe be there. I'll never write anything off the board necessarily when it comes to a draft day, but I mean, after seeing that video, I'm like, dude, he is calling everyone trying to make a move.
For sure. And he's clearly trying to keep his cards like he's openly said, hey, the pick is like up for grabs. Come make us offers.
Yeah.
He clearly is at least open to the idea of I'll move down. Now, I actually don't think, and this is something that I realized recently, Arizona has 6 picks in the top 100. I
Yeah.
don't really know if moving down to 11 and 23 does that much for them. Like, yes, they get 2 other players, but like they already have so many premium. Like, at some point, you got to start putting stars on this team.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just have like a ton of depth, which is
No,
kind of
I
how
agree.
Kyler's constructed.
Like, I think with Arizona right now, I think there's a lot of questions going into last season when Kyler would come back. Okay, how's Kyler going to look? Is Kyler going to be the same? Like, that was a big, obviously, injury for him. I thought he looked fantastic. I think Kyler's play this season was really solid. And I think after seeing that, if you're Arizona, your decision, as you pointed out, should be to play aggressive in the draft. Go out there and try to find playmakers, find these stars, because your quarterback looks healthy. And what we've seen from Kyler beforehand, obviously prior to the injury, was the explosiveness. He was a guy who was definitely, I think, in that top 10 conversation and someone you can feel like you can sit there and win with. So I think they should play aggressive, use what they have, the capital. If they want to try to move up, yes, try to do that. Stay in spots that are, giving them premium options at skill positions or different areas that are key to their team. And I agree. Moving back, at some point, you can't just have all depth. You got to have really high-end players. And that's what when you have that many picks inside the top 100, that's what it's giving you the opportunity to do.
Or move back up. Like, I think they're a prime team, like, for example, and that's why I think the 3-team trade actually makes a lot of sense, because Arizona can deal picks and kind of maneuver the board because they have so much capital to make it happen.
Yeah.
We moved back. Now the Chargers are moving back. But one last thing I want to highlight about the top 5, which is the Chargers. And this is something you probably don't know unless if you're like deep into Chargers Twitter, is Malik Neighbors met with the team this week. And on Instagram Live, about halfway through the day after he had met with the Chargers, he was going to open houses and was taking videos of going into houses in Southern California, saying how much he'd love to live there, which kind of is opening up the can of worms of
Is
if
that
they
reading the tea leaves a little bit?
Is it reading the tea leaves? Is there something to it? I mean, it could just be an off-season house, but it's something to keep in mind if there's the Marvin Harrison versus Malik Neighbors conversation at 5. Like, if that actually happens, I do not know Marv is going to be the pick. I think Neighbors
I agree. I think as we've talked internally between us, either in text exchange or I think the Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Malik Neighbors conversation is a little bit closer than people want to let on to. And I think there's been reports already that there are multiple teams that have Neighbors listed higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. on their draft boards.
And another thing you have to consider, and it's like a weird consideration, but Malik Neighbors is 20, whereas Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be 22 at the start of the season. So if you're thinking about it, like if you have a dead tie, you might just be like, hey, I'll take the younger player because I know I can have him for longer. And that's
again, I think the upside for both, obviously, again, we're talking about two guys that are extremely high ceiling wide receivers. Like, I think I will admit, like, maybe just because he played at LSU, but when I watch Neighbors, I'm kind of like, that reminds me of Jamar a little bit, the way that they play.
Yeah.
So I don't know. They're definitely different body types in terms of, what they can bring or maybe what they do on the field. But again, I don't think there's a wrong. If you're the Chargers and you're sitting there and you have either Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't think there's a wrong call.
No.
It'll just be two guys that whose careers are sort of linked together for forever and compared to one another.
Yeah. All right, so let's hop into our draft now. And I'll put on our draft music to signal we're back. I am the 19th pick, so I'm picking for the Rams if you're just listening on audio. So I will be the first pick. I am starting with the Rams at pick number 19. Okay, so if I'm in the Rams war room, the biggest thing I have to consider now is the pass rush. With Aaron Donald retiring, huge gap. They lost Leonard Floyd a couple years ago, and while they had some young pieces step up, they're still really lacking there. So I think this is the easiest pick on the board right now, just because I'm going to go Jared Verse. I'm going to go for the edge because we've already had 2 edges go. We've already had both interior defensive linemen go, and they're going to go after pass rushing help. So I'm just going to take Jared Verse.
Yeah, I think it's a smart pick. I really like Jared Verse. I think there's a high upside there on him. And I think, again, when you lose Aaron Donald, I know he was an interior defensive lineman. Obviously, the D tackle was his listed position, but the pass rush that he brought and the ripple effect it gave for everyone else, because obviously everyone's doubling Aaron, you're going to have one-on-one opportunities. That's gone now. I do agree. You need to start to build up that defensive line again. So I think Verse is would be a solid pick for them at 19.
Okay. Well, you're up on the clock at pick number 20, and this is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right. So for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm going to go ahead. I know there's some people who are like, oh, they could go receiver. They could add something like that. I know they traded Deontay Johnson. I don't think it's a way that they're going to go. I don't think they reached on a quarterback here. I think they may have learned their lesson with doing that with Kenny Pickett. I don't think they're really going to try that again too quickly. So I'm actually going to have them go and address the offensive line. I'm going to have them go with the Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia. I think they're going to pair him on the other side with, I believe, Broderick Jones, also is a Georgia Bulldog, if I remember correctly, who's on the other side of their line. I mean, yes, we talked about this last time regarding Cincinnati. The sample size is smaller compared to other prospects and how much Mims played, but there is still an undeniably huge upside, great strength, great size that you've seen. And I think Pittsburgh likes to, since they're an AFC North team, they like to establish in the trenches. They love the run game. They want to have pass protection for whoever's back there. I think he makes a lot of sense there. I feel like they would sit there and say, we can develop him and we can turn him into something. Plus, playing along, I know Broderick Jones is on the other side of the line in this situation, but there's familiarity and synergy already built into your offensive line if you add a second former teammate. So,
are you worried about how raw Mims is, or are you just going for the upside?
So, yeah, I am a little bit worried of the rawness of him, certainly. But there is something to be, again, I always believe buy the highest ceiling players that you can, regardless of position, typically.
Yeah.
So Mims, to me, I just feel like, yeah, Pittsburgh has a pretty decent track record, at least historically, maybe not in the last couple seasons, of developing offensive linemen. I think they'd be okay to do with Mims. I'd stick them there.
All right. Well, then that means I'm up on the clock at pick 21. And this isn't where I was originally going to go, but I feel like I kind of have to. With Miami, just because of where the board has fallen for us, I'm going to take Quinyon Mitchell.
God damn it.
Maybe they don't need a corner. Like, they don't necessarily need a corner. Like, they can use somebody opposite Jalen Ramsey. But it just makes a ton of sense. They have a falling player on their board who's probably highest player on their board, somebody who they think they can develop. Especially with that Raven scheme coming in, I think they can take a high shutdown corner. And so I have to end the slide here, and I'll have him go to Miami.
Yeah, okay, so full transparency, Mitchell is going to be my next pick. That's who I had going to Philadelphia. Yeah, I like Mitchell. He's a player we touched on earlier. I think he's a really good physical corner. I think he has the ability to play lockdown. I like the makeup speed. I like the IQ. I like the athleticism. Yes, he's falling. I think we're a little bit lower on the corners. Not in terms of their ceiling or anything like that of the players that they could be. I just feel like we thought maybe some of the other players were more premium to the spot rather than go corner.
Well,
but
wait,
yeah,
Mitchell's here for a second.
Yeah.
Did you see that stat about defensive tackles versus corners now?
Yeah, because how much are they getting paid? Like the highest paid corner is like not even close to anywhere near the top paid defensive tackle.
It would be the 12th highest paid defensive tackle, which is so like corner is pretty much isn't a premium position anymore.
Yeah, it's lost. I think it's a little bit of its luster, and I'm not quite sure it has that pertains to be. Maybe it's because I feel like sometimes corners themselves have shorter shelf lives of how dominant they can be, and maybe I don't know.
I also wonder if the league has just kind of transitioned to where safeties are a little bit more important than corners. Like,
yeah,
Like, if you have an average corner, you're going to be fine if you have an elite safety. Like,
Yeah.
think about these secondaries that are really dominant. Usually they have guys up top who are kind of manning the middle. And then you have good shutdown corners, but most teams have like 3 receivers now. So like
Well, I'm
having
just thinking too,
that
like,
doesn't really help you.
I know it's a little bit different in terms of value, but L'Jarius Sneed got traded for a 3rd round pick in 2025.
Yeah.
And he was, I would say, definitely the best corner in the NFL last season. And that's all you could get for him. I think it speaks. I know the contract, obviously, situation factors into how much you can get, not ignoring that. But he was the best corner at his position, and a team only offered a 3rd, and they took it. I think it speaks to kind of where the market is on corners at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I'll let you be on the clock now. So it's
Yeah,
pick 22.
so with Mitchell out of the way for the Eagles, again, I watched the Eagles secondary last season. It was horrible. I think they still need to address the defensive backfield. And with Mitchell gone, I'll go ahead and slide to the guy that I had going next. I would have Kool-Aid McKinstry go
Wow,
to
over Cooper DeJean?
yes.
Wow. So I would have picked Cooper DeJean because I think the safety flexibility would be big for them. Being
I
able to
have
play
a
the
lot. I
nickel.
have a number of worries about Cooper DeJean.
All right, let's hear him.
So my bigger worry with DeJean is he going to be able to compete with the speed, top end wise, vertically with some of the wide receiving threats he's going to see in the NFL. Obviously, the ball skills were good. The safety need, the ability to transfer over there is obviously important. But he's still a guy I have taken in the 1st round. But McKinstry is just someone I would just favor over him. I mean, again, you look at him. I like the physical ability. I think he has really fluid hips, very athletic, quality feet. I just like him a little bit better than DeJean at this point.
I get it. You're not worried about the fractured foot?
Well, obviously that creeps into the picture a little bit, but I still like Kool-Aid McKinstry just more than DeJean at the moment. I just worry about DeJean. I know DeJean
Yeah,
can be.
I
I
get
feel like
it.
DeJean's a guy who, after 2 years of corner, they'd say, okay, let's move you to safety.
I get it. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think you're picking him as a versatile piece. Like, you're kind of thinking that he'll be like a Derwin James type-ish player of like where you can just move him around a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's never going to get to the level that Derwin was when he came into the league.
No.
But I think you have a creative enough defensive coordinator, which I love Vic Fangio. I think his scheme is great, but I don't know if he's can evolve the game enough to be able to use a player like that well enough. I mean, look at Jalen Ramsey last year with the Dolphins. Well, so I'm picked number 23 with the Vikings, which we let them be on the clock. They will not pick at this spot. We will just make that 100% clear. But if they were picking here, I think there's a lot of options you could go with. And I'm a little tempted to just take Cooper DeJean for them because they need secondary help as is, and they could stick him wherever they want him to go. They could pick him at outside corner. They could put him in the nickel. They can put him at safety. So I think that's where I'm going to go just because they have a very old secondary, and I think they need some youth. Best player on the board right now. I think he just makes a ton of sense. Like, I would have went Latham here because I think you can always use offensive line help, but they're kind of set at tackles. They need more interior help, which I don't know if they'd go a Jackson Powers Johnson quite yet.
Yeah, I actually would have probably leaned towards Jackson Powers Johnson, but again, DeJean falling. If you have a high opinion of DeJean, which again, people probably have him higher at this point. If I haven't looked at a lot of mock drafts, but I would assume he's higher than this at 23. But
he's actually falling a lot because he's been hurt the entire combine season. So a lot of people are worried about his medicals.
I guess
so. He has medical concern. Well, you're up on the clock at Dallas at pick number 24.
Yeah, so Dallas is always such an interesting team, I feel like, in terms of mocks to try to pick for, because Jerry Jones is cooked. And that makes it difficult. It's sort of, he's basically just playing a game of roulette with himself in terms of who he's going to pick. That said, I think that Jerry Jones is like, we need another wide receiver. I think we need another playmaker for Dak. maybe they do something crazy and they were like, oh, wait, you know what? We're going to go quarterback because I'm Jerry Jones. And I really actually have no idea what I'm doing. And when people look for me for interviews, I'm just writing my name in cursive a bunch of times on a blank legal pad. But that said, I'm going to go receiver. I'm going to take A.D. Mitchell. I'm going to go A.D. Mitchell to Dallas. People watch the tape on A.D. Mitchell and be like, oh, he takes plays off. Oh, he looks lazy. Oh, he's not running to this ball. There's so many balls last year that Quinn Ewers just like not even close to him. Not even close. Like he wins the route. Quinn Ewers not even close. I like A.D. Mitchell a lot. I think he has really good feet. Great with jump balls. I think you saw that at times. I also think he's a really patient long ball tracker. So on those vertical plays, he's really patient with it. Selects the time. Again, really good yak receiver. The only thing I guess you would really, in my mind, have a big concern about, again, it's like, oh, is he going to take plays off? Whatever. I'm not too worried about that. I think guys get that right. I think it's a bit of a lazy narrative to assess to a player, especially again, when I watch Ewers and I'm like, that pass isn't close. He won the route. That pass isn't close. He won the route. So I'd go A.D. Mitchell.
The one huge knock on Mitchell, which is like, I guess it's like one of those things if you buy the statistic, but it's yards per route run. His yards per route run is like 1.9. It's so low, but it also has to do with Ewers is horrible. Like I don't
Ewers
even
isn't good.
I don't understand how people thought, like I was reading so many articles during the college season that if he had come out this year, he would have been a first round pick. I don't see it in any way. I mean, JJ McCarthy looks elite in comparison.
No, Ewers, no. If I was Texas, I would be like, hey, Quinn, you probably should leave because we want to start Arch now, buddy.
He's just not good.
No, and I don't. Yeah. So I think a big reason for that statistic is the shortcomings of Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna go to pick number 25, which is the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay fans always have an opinion about this stuff, but luckily the board fell for them. So I'm just gonna take CJ Latham. They need a tackle. Bakhtiari, he was cut. He didn't retire, but he probably will retire. So they need a tackle. They can use extra help there. So I'm just going to say take JC Latham, and they can get that physicality they need back. And so they kind of became a finesse team in the second half of the year, which really worked for them. But they can bring back that physical running style, which is probably why they signed Josh Jacobs over Aaron Jones anyway. And so they can add back in that to their philosophy.
No, I think I really do like JC Latham. He was a guy that I think certainly Cincinnati is going to consider actually at 18. I know we had him slipping.
Yeah.
By the way, just on the Bengals really quick, I believe every single player that they've had come to visit from their top 30 visit has either been a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman. So that should tell you where they're going. They haven't invited anyone for a visit for top 50, or I should say top 30. That is not one of those two positions.
I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of what
it does. Need. So, but anyway, I really like Latham. I think him here. Green Bay is one of those teams where I think they could also just go like best player available on the board because I don't think they have a ton of holes at the moment. Like I know they became a finesse team, but I think with what they have, there's not an area where I sit there and say Green Bay really needs this. Like I think Green Bay could go a guy like Nate Wiggins. Like they could go with a corner. I mean, they lost Darnell Savage. Just go ahead and try to rebolster the secondary. But I think Latham's a good pick here.
I think another player that I could see them targeting, and I think will be on the board, is they could be the contenders for the first safety at Tyler Nubin.
I agree.
They need people on the back end, and I think getting a very smart player, maybe not the most athletically gifted, but they've kind of never really leaned. I mean, they have very high RAS players, but they're not scared to take players who don't have high RAS scores. So I think he would make sense for them too.
I agree. I think Latham's a good pick.
All right, you're on the clock with pick 26, which is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, so I think Tampa Bay, I think we could maybe say it, not a run on corners, but the run on corners will continue here in my mind. I think losing Carlton Davis, that was the number one guy there for a number of years. So with my pick, I would go with Nate Wiggins here at 26.
You concerned that he's 173 pounds?
So yes, obviously the weight is a concern, but the great thing about weight is that you can put more on. Like that's a possibility. And when I look at Wiggins, I think what really stands out, recovery speed, fantastic. Might be the best recovery speed for a corner in the draft this season. Playmaker, had 2 pick sixes in college. Hips, fantastic. Really fluid swivel, great athlete. again, for Tampa Bay, when you lose a guy like Carlton Davis, you sort of need to go out there and replenish that spot. So Wiggins, to me, makes sense for Tampa Bay in this secondary. I think it works out really well. Again, and Todd Bowles being the head coach, defensive guy, you go DB there in my mind.
I agree. I'm right there with you. I think it makes a ton of sense. They need the help. I think they could be another contender to pick a receiver.
Yeah, they could be.
There's at this spot, there's not that much available. But for instance, if a Brian Thomas fell or an AD Mitchell, I think they could definitely be potentials to pull the trigger. But I could also see the Bills jumping way up because I don't think they're going to get any of these tier receive. Like they're either going to have to way reach for one of the round 2 guys or wait till the end of round 2 and then basically all of tier 2 will be gone.
See, okay, I'll say this. On the Bills note, I think we haven't talked about it yet. The Bills could be a team that looks to trade up. I think they really should consider it because there's no Diggs, there's no Gabe Davis. I like Shakir, but you have Dalton Kincaid. That's good. Dawson Knox. You need more help. You need more vertical help, definitely. And Josh Allen, again, Diggs fell off. There's a falling out there. That's the whole story what it is. But you need to get Josh Allen another weapon out there. Like, they'll still be fine if they have something less than that. But if you're Buffalo, I think you got to seriously sit there and say, do we want to try to move up somewhere where we could get a Brian Thomas? Do we want to make a move somewhere up there where we could maybe put ourselves in one of these top end receiver abilities to maybe get an AD Mitchell, something like that?
I think I almost think they're almost guaranteed to move up at this point.
I would be curious to see the odds right now from Vegas of what their odds are to trade up for a pick.
I got to assume it's high. I mean, now they have such a glaring need. I mean, there's no way. I mean, people are saying the Chargers wide receiver room is worse, which I guess it's apples to apples. They're both horrible.
No, they're not good. I mean, again, losing like Gabe Davis, I don't think was that big of a loss because I never really thought Gabe Davis had big games and he had Gabe Davis would be huge games, like fantastic games, and then there would just be this huge flatline lull, massive game. So I don't know, but Diggs hurts. Like, yes, obviously Stephon Diggs is Stephon Diggs.
Well, let's pick 27 and then we'll get to the Bills. So pick 27 is the Cardinals again, which if you watch that video, the Cardinals GM, dude is wheeling and dealing. He might be moving up and down this draft board as is. Like, I have no idea if he's going to be here. But if he is, I'm going to take an interior lineman, and I'm not going to take Jackson Powers-Johnson.
Wow.
I'm going to take Graham Barton, and the reason is because he's played all 5 positions.
All right.
I think that is more valuable for them right now because they need both a guard and center. So if they decide once later in the draft, if they can get value somewhere else, I think the versatility is going to be very valuable for them to where they could try him at all 5 spots if they want. They could try him on the 3 interior spots, and they have a little bit more flexibility there.
I agree. I think, again, JC Powers-Jackson, I like, but the versatility that you pointed out of Graham Barton, like, that's big. 5 different spots to be able to show in college you could have done that. That's not a small deal. That's big for versatility. Because again, if he doesn't work in one spot, you can pivot and be like, all right, we try you out here. So I like to pick at 27.
It also just gives you, they have so many picks in the first round that if there's a guard or a tackle or a center available at a spot, they probably shouldn't. Like, they could still take Zach Frazier probably at the start of round 2 if they want. I mean, they're 4th. Like, and then they could take a center and then they put Barton at guard, and they're probably sitting pretty good with their young offensive line.
I agree.
They have 100%. So many picks. Well, you're up with the Bills. So do you want me to just pick on receiver?
Yeah, so Bills, it's going to be receiver. I will be going with the man at the top of that list, Ladd McConkey. I'm going to have Ladd McConkey go to the Buffalo Bills at 28. So, Ladd was a guy that I feel like prior to the Senior Bowl was like second-round pick. Really nice. But then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and I think it was Daniel Jeremiah who put out, like, every single time he had a corner listed on his notes was didn't handle Ladd McConkey well. I will say for Ladd, he's a hands catcher, which I really like. Natural hands catcher. He catches everything out in front of him, which is good. I think he has really crisp route running. The feet are very solid. I think he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. I think he might struggle at times with the physicality and maybe beat corners over the top, but I still think for what he can bring and play off of guys like Kincaid and Hope Shakir, that and just I feel like he'd be a good guy too at finding soft spots in zones, sitting down. Josh Allen finds him. Feels like a good sort of off script wide receiver. I think McConkey at 28 makes a lot of sense. That's who I would go with.
I think it makes a ton of sense, and it's kind of a flavor of what they're looking for. Because
Yeah.
they might add a veteran wide receiver here that might change things to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But it's kind of what flavor they're going for, because they could decide like, hey, we want more of a possession receiver type guy and go for Roman Wilson.
Yeah.
And if that's what they feel they need, I don't know what they're going to do. I really think they're going to move up. So
I tend to agree.
well, so I'm up with the Lions at pick 29. And this one's a slam dunk. It makes sense for Dan Campbell overall, and that's Jackson
Yes.
Powers Johnson.
Yes.
This is where the center goes. They take the bruiser, they take the big boy, the guy who's probably going to come into the league already be a top 10 center. They're going to stick him right in front of Jared Goff, and they're probably going to feel fantastic about it.
Yeah, I agree. Part of me now they wouldn't do it again. But again, this just fits to who the Detroit Lions are. They're a physical team. They want to come after you. I mean, I remember against the Chargers, what was it, 4th and 7 on like their second drive of the game, and they ran the ball and picked it up for a 14-yard run with David Montgomery.
Yep.
That's just what this team likes to do. That's its identity. That's what Dan Campbell is. I think Jackson Powers Johnson would fit very well in with Detroit.
Yeah, I think it's an easy fit. It's probably what they're hoping is going to happen in the draft anyway. They're another team that could take a receiver if they really wanted to, but with the run on receivers, I envision happening. Because I think now with the Bills losing their guy, I could also see teams at this top of round 2 who want to get ahead of this tier 2. If there's a guy that they have maybe like in between tier 1, tier 2, that they're going to jump into the top 10. So they have that extra year on the 5th year option. It wouldn't surprise me.
No, I agree. Again, but Detroit's always so interesting, I think, too, to an extent, because there could be with their board, like, they look at it as best player available. I think Detroit's philosophy a little bit is best player available. If you look at their recent drafts, like with Gibbs, Jameson Williams, they look at, like, what's our upside that we could possibly get. So I think Jackson Powers will be the pick, but if there's someone who's falling, I think they're also a team that'd be like, we might not need it, but we're going to take it.
1,000%. And they're also a team that's shown they take BPA, and it's regardless of positional value.
Yeah.
I mean, they took a running back and a linebacker in round 1 last year.
Well, that was going to be my point, too, is like, people with the Lions, like last year, they took Gibbs, and they're like, wait, but you have DeAndre Swift. Or like, we already have Jordan Montgomery. It's like, yeah, we don't care. Like, we liked him. We're taking him.
For sure. I think they're willing to do whatever they can do to make it work.
I agree.
Well, you're up with the Ravens at pick number 30.
Yeah, so, originally I had hoped that one player would continue to fall just so it would fit very nicely in there. That said, not really what happened. Obviously, J.C. Latham got picked. So I'm actually going to go with an offensive tackle again still. We're going to go with, where is he? Oklahoma tackle.
Yeah,
Tyler.
You're taking Tyler Guyton.
Tyler Guyton, yes. That's who we're going to go with, Tyler Guyton. I think Tyler Guyton is a very interesting prospect. RAS score, really liked him. I mean, I think he got like a 9.62 on the RAS score. Weight, I think he's like 322, had a good vertical, was, faster first 40-yard dash, good 20-yard splits. I think the size, length, athleticism, all really good. Good one-on-one blocking on an island. I just think when you look at him, he's a player that, the Ravens have a great track record at this point of developing offensive linemen through the years. I mean, they've done it with Stanley. They did it with Orlando Brown. I think they could do it here. Obviously, Morgan Moses is gone. They have a hole to fill. So that's who I would go with Tyler Guyton for Oklahoma. I think he's a high projectable player. I would go tackle there. I know there's an itch maybe to take a wide receiver, but I don't think there's a wide receiver that really fits the scheme maybe that they're trying to run. I know people could say, hey, sit there and take Xavier Worthy, but I don't know if they're going to do Xavier Worthy because I feel like he seems similar to Hollywood Brown a little bit, and that didn't necessarily go great. Obviously, players are different from pick to pick and player to player, but I think for the Ravens, Tyler Guyton makes the most sense in my mind.
That's where I was going to go with the 49ers, so I think that makes total sense. I have no problem with the pick. I actually don't know what to do with the Niners because the Niners don't have that many holes. Like, And right now, I don't feel like there's a clear best player available
Mhm.
for what they could do. So they could go a lot of spots, but I'm going to go with the player that I like quite a bit, who's a nice boundaries corner that a ton of dudes are starting to hype up and saying that he might go higher into the first round. And that's Kamari Lassiter.
All
I
right.
think Kamari Lassiter is going to be on the other side of Chardavius Ward. And then they have their 2 boundary corners. They feel probably pretty good about it. I think he'll probably be the highest player on their board, but I'm not sure. I'm not too confident on what the Niners could do here because there's not a clear faller. They're a team that I think could totally trade out of this pick and just build the depth of their roster. If somebody wants to come up, like I think the Raiders, if they saw this, they might come up for Penix or
Yes.
Bo Nix or one of those guys, or Denver as well, and try to get into round 1 to get that 5th-year option on one of these dudes.
I agree. I think, I think a player who could have intrigued, obviously he's gone now, but I could see it for San Francisco would have been a guy like Lad McConkey. Like, I think that's a guy that they would have considered in there, but obviously he's gone. And again, to your point, I could see them trading out of it, just getting depth, because I feel like San Francisco, again, when you look at the roster every year, I feel like we say it, one of the most complete out there. There's not really a lot of glaring holes. So I think, going with a guy like Lassiter, with Lassiter. Lassiter. Jesus Christ, that's not banging on it. Lassiter. So yeah, I do like Lassiter. I think that'd be a good pick there. He offers versatility, obviously brings something to the secondary too. I think across from Chadarius Ward, really good player.
Then you're the last person on the board. You're at pick 32, which is the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, so Kansas City, again, they're sort of a team right now who I sit there and say, after how things have currently transpired with Rashee Rice, or maybe they could also try to trade up. Maybe they look to try to go get a receiver because, yes, you still have Travis Kelce, who's possibly the greatest tight end of all time, and you still just come off the Super Bowl victory. But if Rashee Rice is gone for the year and maybe not coming back, again, things have to shake out that way. You do need a pass catcher. And I feel like if that's the case, this is where I would go with X Worthy. I would go Xavier Worthy at 32. And I'm tempted a little bit to go Leggett from South Carolina because I like Leggett, but I still think I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy. Again, excellent speed, just absurd speed. Deep speed. He can go off the top. Separation, he can definitely create. I think his bend is really good. Fantastic agility. Again, the weaknesses are there. He's thinner. He's not as much of a hand catcher. Just getting off the line, too, I think he's a little bit of improvement on. But he's a guy who I look at and I say, in the Kansas City offense, I'd like to see him with Mahomes. I think they make it work. Obviously, he's not Tyreek by any means in terms of overall, at least not at the moment. But I feel like he's a player who could really fit in for them, be explosive, continue to help them. Because again, Kansas City in recent years hasn't been able to take the top off defenses as well. Maybe Xavier Worthy helps open that up. So that's who I would take at 32.
It makes a ton of sense, and I feel like it's such a natural fit, and people like to go there. My one worry about Worthy is their offense has evolved a lot since the Tyreek days, of where they've kind of just utilized Yak and giving their playmakers the ball, having them make plays, scheming guys open, to where I don't know if they'd want to go back to the kind of just let's heave it down the field and go against the 2 deep safeties.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the offense has certainly changed. That's what happens when you have Andy Reid, who's such a great play caller and offensive mind.
Yeah.
But I still think if you gave Andy Reid the opportunity to sit there and work with Xavier Worthy, they could make something happen. And I don't know if they're going to want to go back to just taking the top off of the 2 safeties. I agree. But if he's sitting there at 32, which he will be, I feel like that's the route they're going to go.
I mean, it makes a ton of sense. Well, is there anything you want to analyze now that we finished our round 1? Anything you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I think, look, obviously people have had some things to say about the picks that I've made. But I think, the way things kind of shook out, maybe corners go a little bit higher than we currently have right now, but everything we laid out feels like a very realistic possibility at this point. I don't think we're very far-fetched with any pick. I don't think we're drafting way too high or reaching on anyone. I mean, I laughed at the Zaire Newton thing now, but now you see a $95 million defensive tackle and Derek Brown, and you're sort of like, well, now D-tackle is this wildly premium position, and Zaire Newton, I think, is fantastic. So maybe you do take him at 10.
That's what I mean, I made the video about it yesterday. I really think that he's gonna go a lot higher than people are. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes before an edge, to be honest.
I could
Like,
see that, certainly.
if the Falcons end up picking him, it wouldn't surprise me.
No, I
just
agree.
think defensive tackle has become so much more valuable.
I 100% agree. So you can see how it plays out. But
Well, this has been From the Backseat. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure if you're watching on YouTube to subscribe, like the video, share it. If you found us on TikTok, if you found us on Instagram, if you found us on Facebook, thank you. Make sure to follow us on those platforms. We are officially back. Now I've done a whole week of posting videos. Some
2
have been good.
podcasts in 1 week. We didn't flake on the second one. Wow,
Yeah,
what a
we did.
crazy
We
idea.
did 2 podcasts. And for those listening, little bit of a hint. We're actually going to record the podcast afterwards now so that we have some in the bank. So don't worry, you'll get plenty of From the Backseat
You'll have
content.
plenty.
And remember, if you want to hear Clark talk about baseball, go follow the East Village Times. That is
Go to the EVT Padres podcast. I just posted an episode up there today from our conversations that I had with my co-host James last night. That's up for anyone who wants to listen on there on Spotify. It's on all podcasting platforms available.
Yeah, and make sure to listen to, if you're listening to the audio.
But listen to From the
version-
Backseat first, because
Yeah.
obviously.
Also, it really helps. Watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's where we're really trying to build. If you're listening to it on Apple Podcast, Spotify, totally fine. Keep doing your thing. If you want to watch the video version, we're sitting here talking. So
Chatting about.
yeah. Well, this has been From the Backseat. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. We will see you next time.
See y'all.